You say you want love, but tell me honestly, is it love you really want, or is it to feel chosen by someone? Because there is a huge difference between loving and wanting to be loved. Most people who say they seek love are actually thirsty for validation. They want someone from the outside to prove what they cannot sustain on their own worth. They want to be seen, admired, desired, not because it strengthens the bond, but because it silences their insecurity that screams inside their chest. Most do not seek to love, they seek to be loved, because being loved seems easier, more comfortable. Loving requires effort, discipline, commitment. Being loved seems like a gift that solves everything. If someone loves me, then I'm important. Then I deserve to exist. And this is where the illusion begins. You don't want love. You want the feeling that you are finally enough, that someone looked at you and said with their gaze or with their touch or with their gifts, you're worth it. Because deep down, you don't believe that on your own. Your desire for love is not about sharing, it's about filling your void. Filling that deep void that no one sees but that you feel every day. A void that may have started in childhood, perhaps with rejection, abandonment, or simply from never being taught to see yourself as someone worthy of love without having to prove anything to anyone. So you grew up believing that you need to be chosen to have value, that you need to be desired to be relevant. And every time someone chooses you, you feel for a brief moment that everything is okay, that the emptiness has disappeared. But it always comes back, doesn't it? Erich Fromm called this immature love. It's that love that arises for the need for fusion, that urgency to merge with someone because you cannot stand being with yourself for too long. It's not desire, it's dependency. It's not connection, it's emotional addiction. And the worst part, the culture we live in feeds this. It teaches you to look for someone to complete you, someone to save you, someone to give meaning to your existence. But that is a lie sold as romance. True love does not happen when someone chooses you. It can only be born when you stop needing to be chosen. If you've made it this far, it's because on some level you feel this, that it's true, that something is wrong with the way you relate. You feel that there is something in you that still waits to be validated by someone from the outside. And maybe you're tired of begging for attention, of losing yourself, trying to be what others want, of clinging to the slightest display of affection as if it were all you have. But let me tell you one thing. This video is not to comfort you. It's to awaken you, because as long as you don't see the root of your feeling of emptiness, you will continue to call neediness love and dependency connection. And that only destroys you from within. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to my videos. So Erich Fromm, the famous psychologist, said that most people see the problem of love primarily as an issue of being loved rather than the issue of loving. of being capable of love. So this really needs to be digested. It should be not just read, but really reflected upon slowly, because it reveals an emotional distortion that dominates almost all modern relationships. And the idea that love is something to be received rather than something to be offered. And it's precisely this inversion that transforms what should be a mutual growth experience into a desperate search for validation. Have you noticed how, when thinking about love, what comes to the minds of most people is that someone will choose me? Am I interesting enough? Am I worthy of being loved? Am I beautiful enough? These are legitimate questions, but they reveal a completely outward focus. In this scenario, love becomes a kind of prize, and the person a product trying to be attractive. Fromm points out with surgical precision this misunderstanding. He says being loved is the passive side of love. It is being the object of love. For many, being loved means being desired. And therein lies the problem. We confuse desire with love. We confuse being seen with being cared for. Desire is great, but it is unstable. It can ignite in 1 second and disappear in the next. And if you sense that your love is based on desire, then you become a hostage to the gaze of the other. Your self-esteem becomes a leaf in the wind. Just one rejection, one silence, one no, and everything crumbles inside you. But Fromm goes even deeper. He says that this obsession with being loved has its roots in how we structure our emotional lives from an early age. He states most people are eager for love, but almost no one is capable of truly loving, because to love truly requires something that almost no one is willing to face: emotional maturity. Loving requires stepping outside oneself, looking at the other with responsibility, with intention, not as someone who will complete you, but as someone with whom you wish to share your wholeness. And this is rare, because we are too busy trying to be noticed, trying to prove that we are worthy. With every like, with every response, with every gesture of attention, that we deserve something, that we are worth something, especially with social media. This confusion between loving and love makes love fragile and anxious relationships, full of anxiety, and that are devastating. Relationships where two individuals come together not to build something, but to extract from each other for something lacking within themselves, is not love. It is an emotional bargain, a silent pact. Give me the feeling that I am worth it, and I will give you whatever you want in return. But the bill always comes due, and in the end, there is an emptiness left again. But what exactly are we trying to fill with this desire to be loved? What is this internal void that makes us so susceptible to any affection that seems genuine? The answer to this is a central idea from Fromm, and will be the focus of this video. The neurotic need for fusion, the addiction to feeling alive through the other, and the price we pay for it. This has to do with our own integrity. So Remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So let's look at this hunger for validation. There is a brutal difference between loving someone and needing someone. But most people who say they are in search of love are actually starving for something much more primitive: validation. The desire is not to connect, it is to feel worthy. It's not to share one's essence. It's not to be chosen as a way to fill the internal void that has never been faced directly. And this is where Fromm's theory becomes not only relevant, but necessary. Fromm speaks from what he calls the neurotic need for fusion. In his words, the deepest desire is not for sexual union, but for the yearning for fusion, to rid oneself of separation, to escape the prison of the self. Do you understand the weight of this when you chase after someone to be loved? It is not love that you are seeking. It is fusion. It is oneness. It is the momentary relief from your own internal sense of separation, your ego. You want to escape from yourself. You want someone to hold you so tightly, emotionally, physically, symbolically, that for a few seconds you disappear. Because ego is tiring. The voice in your head goes silent. That insecurity evaporates. That the fear of not being enough, of being alone in the universe, of being forgotten, vanishes. But this is impossible because no one will give you this, in a lasting way at least. No human will forever bear the weight of proving that you have worth. No relationship will heal a wound that is yours. As long as you insist on this illusion, the illusion that being chosen transforms you into someone complete, you will live oscillating between euphoria and collapse. Fromm makes it clear that this type of symbiotic fusion is not love. It is a regressive form of a relationship based on dependence and not freedom. He writes in Symbiotic Love that two people become one, but neither remains as an individual. It is a union without integrity. And it is the trap, because what you call deep love may just be a camouflaged dependency. Perhaps what you feel is overwhelming passion is in fact an addiction to feeling important to someone. It's like an emotional drug. When the other chooses you, you feel alive. But when they pull away, you crumble. When they pull away, this hunger increases. This hunger has to be looked at its roots. Our search for love is, in fact, an unconscious repetition of an old pain, an attempt to do now what we could not do before, to feel unconditionally loved. And this cycle only breaks when you recognize that your pain is not in the present. It is not in the past. What hurts today is the echo of what was unresolved back then, even in your teenage years or later on in life. They are unaddressed issues. So we need to go to the emotional root of the problem. The wounded child, the wounded teenager that still is begging for love with a choked voice. And this is exactly what we will talk about in the next part of this video. Have you ever wondered why, even after so long, certain relationships still crumble? Like you were when you were 5 years old. You feel insecure.
Why do you cling so tightly, so quickly to those who give you the slightest bit of attention? Why do you feel like the whole world is collapsing when someone pulls away or simply stops responding? It's not an exaggeration. It's not drama. It's a child inside. It's a teenager inside screaming for something they never expressed. Eric Fromm used the term inner child, but the entire emotional structure he describes points exactly to the fact that we, in our formative years, learn about how we can get validated from the outside. He states that the experience of separation provokes anxiety. It is by far the most intense source of anguish in human beings, and it is precisely in childhood that this experience of separation manifests with the most brutality. This child who is born completely dependent, it needs to be fed, protected, touched, validated, and above all, it needs to feel emotionally safe. When this doesn't happen, when the love received is conditional, unstable, absent, or manipulative, an invisible wound is created. And this wound doesn't disappear with time. It just hides under adult masks for self-sufficiency. Impulsive relationships, constant need to be desired, paralyzing fear of rejection. Fromm writes about how many adults seek in relationships a symbolic way back to the womb, to the state of security, to total union and oneness. This, according to him, is a regression, not an evolution. He says that the childish form of love we have is I love you because I am loved. This means that you are emotionally immature. The wounded child inside, you learn, has to be pleasing in order to be worthy. You needed to be useful. It needed to be compliant. And now, as an adult, you continue trying to deserve love, trying to fit in, trying to be enough for someone to stay. But the problem was never that you weren't worthy of love. The problem was that you learned you had to strive to have love. And this shaped your entire view of affection. It shaped your way of loving, of giving yourself up, of not protecting yourself. Love is often just repeating this old pattern. If I am perfect, then you won't abandon me. If I please you, then you will choose me. If I am needed, they will love me. And this is cruel. This is a cruel cycle because no matter how much you do, how much you give, how much you nullify yourself, nothing will be enough to silence the pain of that child or teenager. They still believe that love must be earned. The sense of wholeness must be earned. And you're attracting relationships that only confirm this. Relationships that do not heal. They only reinforce your sense of emptiness. But there is a way out. Healing doesn't come from the outside. It doesn't come from the next relationship or the next sexual encounter. You don't need these crumbs of attention. Healing begins when you finally look at your inner child with no judgment, but with compassion, or even your inner teenager, when you stop waiting for others to make you feel full and to take responsibility. And as you walk this emotional maturity, the path of true love will reveal itself. So we're going to talk about this, what this literally means in the next section. What mature love is according to Fromm, and why it's so rare, and how you can start building it within yourself. even after so long, trying to fill it from the outside. Real love is an act of courage and maturity. It is truly one of the most demanding tasks of human life. It is no coincidence that most people fail miserably when trying, because loving is not about falling in love. It is not about desire. It is not about attachment loving. As Eric Fromm teaches us, it is an act of courage, of conscious decision, of emotional discipline. And this is exactly why it is so rare, because it requires you to be whole before ever touching the other. Fromm doesn't mince words. Love is an activity. It is not a passive affection. It is a continuous standing up, not a sudden falling. In general, the active character of love can be described by saying that to love is above all to give and not to receive. People who confuse attention with love, attachment with bond, neediness with surrender, are people who have not found love within themselves. Love is an art, and like all art, it requires learning, patience, practice, and perhaps most importantly, humility. He writes, anyone who intends to learn the art of loving must start in the same way one starts to learn any other art, through practice, discipline, concentration, and patience. But how many are truly willing to do this? How many are willing to stop consuming love as if it were a shelf product ready to be used and discarded? To truly love is to swim against the current of immediate culture, against the inflated ego, against the fear of vulnerability. To truly love is to have the courage to strip down emotionally without any guarantee that the other will do the same, and still love. This is the point which love ceases to be a romantic fantasy and become an internal revolution. When you stop wanting someone to save you and start being someone who can build, when you stop begging for affection and start choosing to love consciously, clearly, responsibly, when you do not love because you need to, but because you want to. And for this to happen, it is necessary to see and abandon one of the greatest emotional traps of our times, the infantilized version of love promoted by modern culture. The idea that love is to be chosen, to please, to fit in, and that the other is here to fill our void. In the next part, I will discuss the collective fantasy and why it prevents so many people from living real love. We live in a culture that packages love as a product, easy to consume, easy to discard, seductive at first glance, and superficial in content, like in Hollywood, social media, romantic songs. Everything repeats the same sweet and dangerously false message that to love is to find someone who completes you, makes you happy, one who fills your voids with presence, with affection and promises. But that is not love. It is emotional dependency, disguised as poetry. And Eric Fromm knew this all along, way before the age of algorithms. He writes, in modern culture, most people believe that loving is simple and that the difficult part is finding the right object to love or to be loved by. This belief results from the superficial idea that loving is easy for anyone. And here lies the trap. People do not want to learn to love. They want to be loved effortlessly. They want to live intense romances without having to look within. They want to be desired without asking themselves why. They want to be like a mirror that confirms their own idealized image and not as a real encounter between two imperfect human beings. The infantilized version of love begins right there. When we turn to the relationship into a fantasy field where the other exists to save us from ourselves. Fromm denounces this as a structural flaw in our society. We are not taught to love. We are conditioned by our desire for status, beauty, approval, pleasure. And we project all of this onto the other. What we want is someone to prove that we are special, to take us out of our loneliness, our doubt, our insecurity, our feeling of separation from the cosmos. But that is not love. We are searching for an emotional father, a nurturing mother, for someone to take on the responsibility that should be ours. He also points out that in immature love, the other is seen as an object, an emotional consumption, something that must make me feel or look good. And here is the most uncomfortable point. You may be relating not to the other person, but to the idea of what that person makes you feel. This explains why so many people do not love, why so many people just cling, and why relationships end as soon as the illusion falls. Culture trains us to desire sensations, not deep connections, to seek intensity, not intimacy, to consume the other, not to build together. The result? Fragile, anxious relationships, hypersensitive to the slightest sign of frustration. People who fall in love quickly but burn out even faster. Love based on expectations, not reality, not neediness, not on choice. And all of this is constantly reinforced by a system that profits from your dissatisfaction, that sells the promise that the next one will be better, that if you haven't found this one yet, it's because you haven't tried hard enough to appear more desirable and more interesting, more perfect. But true love does not happen in showcases. It doesn't arise from emotional marketing. It can only be when two people meet without the need to complete each other, but with the willingness to share of themselves. And this requires a type of awareness that goes against everything we have been taught about what it means to love. We will talk about in the final section the moment you stop seeking fulfillment from the outside and start loving as an act of freedom, a love that does not arise from neediness, but from overflow, that does not require being chosen, because you have already chosen yourself entirely, and connect with universal love. True love begins exactly where need ends. It doesn't arise from a lack, an urgency, or the fear of being alone. It is born from presence, from your ability to remain whole in front of another, without nullifying yourself, without losing yourself, without begging to be validated, without the need. When you still need to feel chosen, And to feel valuable, you are not loving. You are just trying to exist through the other. You are trying to prove yourself once again that you are worthy of being seen. But real love has nothing to do with that. It is not a cry for help. It is not neediness disguised as passion. Authentic love is a choice. It is a natural expression of someone who has already found themselves, who has already seen themselves as whole, who has already faced their own emptiness and decided no longer to use it as an excuse to emotionally depend on someone. You have spent too much time seeking someone to make you feel special. But what if you stopped that today? What if you decided that from now on, your worth will no longer be measured in the eyes of others? Because that is exactly where freedom begins. The love that comes after doesn't bind, doesn't demand, doesn't suffocate. It shares, it adds, it builds. It does not try to fill what is lacking. It overflows. Now, I want you to know that if this message resonates with you, please leave your comments below. I don't need that to feel chosen, of course, but it's nice to see your comments. And write, if you like, a commitment to yourself. Write that from now on, I will begin to take control of my own story. I will feel whole even without anyone else approving of me. How do you feel about that, dear friend?